animal. But I have obeyed or heard the voice of the Lord and gone on the mission on which the Lord sent him and brought back Agag, king of Amalek. I have utterly destroyed the Amalekites. Verse 22, one of the famous verses in the Old Testament. So Samuel said, Has the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in hearing or obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to hear or obey is better than sacrifice, and to heed or hear than the fat of rams. For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft, and stubbornness is as iniquity and idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he also has rejected you from being king. Verse 24. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words, because I feared the people and obeyed or heard their voice. This is the word of God. As I was reading, you will find something that I was trying to do with the word, that is hear or obey. I use interchangeably. When we look at the language, we find it can be also translated as hear or obey. Therefore, this hearing is not just a mere information to hear and keep it in our mind. This hearing is to be kept in our mind and translate into our hearts and action. Head, heart, and hand, some of us will say. It has to be like head in head and in heart and in habits. It should be translated. The hearing that Saul had, he had to hear it, he had to internalize it, and he has to practice it. That is the meaning of hearing. Now, for example, in our family context, one of the observations I was making here when I was sitting, all of us who are married, I think we have this cross-cultural marriage. Most of us, and as I look, and I was reminded of Auntie about the children, like our daughter even speaks different language, some of the language we don't know. So it's a different thing. But when we say that, for example, at home, if I say to my wife, I'm hungry, I'm not just making an indicative statement. The implication of or application of the statement is imperative, get me food. Only the audience and the speaker understands what they mean to communicate. I just generally say, I'm hungry. I'm not telling my feeling, I'm telling my need. She would get it. If she doesn't get it rightly, you know what will happen. So there is always application when we hear something from the Lord. We know that whatever written recorded is for application, but soul is not applying. Most of us and all of us are leaders, and we are into leadership, positionally and practically. Many times we can be in the leadership, but may not hear God and tell me. What a day that would be if we do not hear from the Lord and instruct our people to do. That would be, I think, one of the greatest tragedy for us. Here, Saul heard the commandment of the Lord. It says, go and utterly destroy. What part of utterly Saul did not understand? It has got a problem with definition. Saul did not understand the definition of utterly destroy. And he goes, gets the best of animals, and also King Agag, bringing him alive. But God says, go and do utterly destroy. Utterly destroy means utterly destroy. Completely. But Saul is not listening. He has stopped listening to the word of the Lord. Although he was in the position of kingship, in the leadership, he has to give leadership to the people, but he had stopped listening to God. He was working for God, but not with God. This is the concept traditionally we have been hearing in the mission or in the ministry. Many times as us who are in the ministry, including me, I fear that I would work for God but without God. That's possible in our ministry. Sometimes we are so much occupied or so much filled with our experiences that our experience leads us through in our ministry. But our evaluated experience requires, and we have to pause for some time and think, am I really hearing from God? Which area I need to hear God and fulfill completely, giving 100%. And we see here, he was not hearing. Hear the voice of the Lord. 6 times, if we calculate here, 6 times the voice is repeatedly told. We see the imperative and instruction given to him. God has segregated very carefully. If you look at the instruction, the way it is elaborated, I will read for all of us. Verse 3. Now go and attack Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have, and do not spare them, but kill both men and women. Categories are given: man and woman, infant and nursing child, ox and sheep, camel and donkey. It never says bring back anything. It is completely a total instruction, clearly defined and given. But did he do? He would argue. Now when the people of God stop listening to God and continue to listen to themselves and the people who they serve, they will change their mindset and they will change their behavior, their action, and they would continue to rebel against the instruction and imperative that God has given to them. And exactly what Saul is doing here. He is reacting. He's becoming arrogant and absent. His language changes. If you observe here, I will not go into detail, however, I want to highlight. Saul says in verse 13 that Saul is said by Samuel in verse 13, you have not obeyed the voice. But he said, I have obeyed. We have brought this to sacrifice to your God. Look at his language. He is not telling Samuel to sacrifice to our God, but he is telling to sacrifice to your God. They have brought. He is not telling, I have brought under my leadership they have brought, but he said, they have brought to sacrifice to your God. Can you see the change of mind, the arrogancy that Saul is playing with the command of God or imperative that God has given to him? And he continues that. And sometimes when we read plainly, we may think that God was so cruel, he did not give him second chance. God gave him second chance. He gave him chance upon chance, and someone said like, what am I hearing? And verse 14, it says like that. What then is this bleating of the sheep and in my ears, and the lowing of the oxen which I hear? Actually, it is voice translated as bleating, because animal doesn't necessarily has God voice. So, as a translation wants us to see the voice. Saul now is not listening, hearing the voice of God, but he is hearing the voice of the animals. Or indicatively, he is hearing the voice of the world, the seduction of the world, and all that is there in the world. And we see that he started hearing the people that God. What is the clue or indication? Verse 24. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. Now he has come to realization and he said that he has sinned. He has admitted. And he said, for I have transgressed the commandment of the Lord and your words. For, this is what I want to highlight, or because I feared people and obeyed their voice. He was more careful to follow people and what people will say, what people will think, what people will treat him, and how people will treat him. than what God would say. He was so much afraid of people than God himself. And therefore, he did not listen or hear or obey God. And we know the impact and effect, what happens to him. He is rejected. By the way, what does the rejection of God look like here? The day God stops speaking to us. Maybe like something very different. Even in the New Testament, we have in the Hebrews, the book of Hebrews, where it says like it is a dangerous thing to fall in the hands of living God. God stopped speaking to Saul. Now it is part of the rejection. Not only he was withdrawn from his kingship, he was into his kingship. Practically, he was into position till he died. He was in the kingship, but God never communicated his message to his people. In a sense, through. And we have an indication, later story, that rebellion is equal to, or disobedience is equal to idolatry and witchcraft. How do we know? From Samuel's, from both 1 King and 2 King, the book of King, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel. We see Saul towards the end of his life, when Samuel died, he goes to a lady who practiced witchcraft and asked Samuel to be brought back. You remember the story? He was asked to brought back. And he, being the king, he should not practice witchcraft or divination, but he himself practiced. So, the rebellion resulted in idolatry. It's an indication by the author that he is going to commit idolatry. Saul, who was supposed to guard and teach and protect his people as per the teaching from Deuteronomy, he did not. He himself rebelled against God and ended up in idolatry. Whenever the people of God ask, when we stop hearing God or when we start rebelling against God, we stop hearing from God. At the same time, we become an idolater. This is very dangerous. And we see he is no longer a king. Somebody else is appointed in his place. In the leadership, at home, in the church, in the workplace. When God has given us this position or the privilege to serve Him, it is really important that we hear Him exactly what He says and do exactly what He wants from us. It is not like 50-50. Today we have a lot of things happening in and around us, a lot of compromising factors. And that makes us ineffective in the ministry. And I want to remind all of us, including me, let us hear God applicationally. I know it sounds really different. Applicational hearing of God's voice is required. Meaning, what we hear, what we know, we ought to practice so that God is glorified.